This episode of the Multi-Point Inspection Podcast is brought to you by Vesperio. Vesperio's Performance Academy offers custom-tailored solutions for service advisors and leaders. As 2024 comes to a close, I invited Kyle and Tom from Vesperio Performance for an encore interview to talk about what 2025 has in store for dealerships and their fixed ops departments. And according to the guys, 2025 will continue the trend of dealerships focusing on profit margins and weeding out inefficiencies, especially with reconditioning used vehicles. They say dealerships are also focusing on optimizing the existing traffic in the store versus driving more traffic, building a deep bench with their teams, and the ever-persistent problem of high turnover rates. The guys at Vesperio Performance have been back at the drawing board looking for the best solutions to these challenges and have returned to the Multi-Point Inspection Podcast to share their insights as well as some success stories.
Tom Fennen, one of the co-founders of Vesperio Performance.
Kyle Newsom with Vesperio Performance.
Well, guys, welcome back to the Multi-Point Inspection Podcast. It's been a minute. It seems like a lot of things have changed. You guys are on my LinkedIn. You keep popping up with partnering with dealers. What's going on? What is going on with dealerships? What does 2025 look like?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing, Brandon, and thanks for having us back. We always enjoy these conversations. But one of the biggest things we're seeing is really that shift back to focus on fixed operations. We're out of this. We're the post-COVID, right? We're kind of getting back to, we'll call it normal, okay? But it's really putting that emphasis back on profit margins and fixed operations, like growing and paying attention and developing our fixed operations performance and profit. And so, we're seeing, rising cost of new vehicles, used vehicles. The gap is larger than ever between new and used. There's a significant focus when we get into that on the fixed ops side when it comes to reconditioning these cars and getting them frontline ready. Being a good partner to that used car department just highlights going into 2025. I mean, we had to have a fantastic process put in place. And then we're seeing a lot of fixed ops inefficiencies. Some of this stuff is overlooked, or it's really something that presents a big opportunity, but maybe we're not focused on it in the way that we should be focused on. We're seeing a lot of that with some of the dealerships where, we call it a limited belief, right? Where it's just kind of the norm, right? Or we constantly do this, or this is our norm. This is what our dealership does. We have X amount of bays. This is just what we do, right? We can't do anything until we grow. We need more bays, or we need more repair orders. That's always a common one that we hear. When in reality, are we optimizing what we already have coming in? A lot of times that's a big opportunity. So I think there's some key challenges going into 2025, kind of finishing up the year here and then going into 2025 that really are huge opportunities.
Yeah, I did an episode. I was so proud. I'm the king of being too cute by half when it comes to titles to episodes, and it was called What Condition My Recondition Was In. So Kenny Rogers tune. Anyway, that's a gnarly deal, man. That's a lot of moving pieces, especially with the outsourcing and things, and that's easy to drop the ball on that,
Well, and I think it's all about communication, right? Especially in that process. And one of the big factors that we really convey with our stores on the fixed side is what the variable department is up against, right? There's always this clock ticking on those used cars, right? They're all very unique. Each one is, a unicorn per se, but, that value of those used cars is a tricky proposition right now. Tomorrow, next week, what they purchase that used car could go up, it could go down. So really focusing on that traditional 3-day turn, but really making sure the fixed department really understand what that is costing, not only the variable department, but the whole dealership by not being a good partner and getting those cars out, in that 3-day turn.
Yeah. How important is being proactive? That's a human nature thing, I think. I mean, when I was in the parts game, we just took the calls that came in, and we were holding on for dear life. There was no sales calls, man. I mean, we couldn't do it, because we were totally reactionary. I'm sure that's in every industry, but what do you guys see when it comes to that in the fixed ops departments?
I think with all the tailwinds, Kyle alluded to it, prior to 2024, even the beginning of 2024 reality, where as long as you reacted in any fashion, you were going to be successful within a dealership environment. The interest rates were super low. There's a high amount of value on the new side per vehicle, which was something traditionally just didn't happen. Of course, you had the used car opportunity, and I think what happens a lot of times in that environment is the dealerships, even on the fixed side, are successful, but they're not really clear on how they had that success. Right. So when they run into problems, they can't go back and say, okay, hey, here's how we got to pivot. Here's how we got to change what we're doing and thinking, to your point, being more proactive. And they freeze. They don't know exactly where to turn or what to do. And you double down that effect with turnover, which has always been a fight on the fixed side, really has, I think, gotten worse in 2024. Because now with the pressure of fix having to make up the difference of some of that profitability that is disappearing a little bit on some of the dealerships on the front end, they don't know how to, again, do what they need to do to be able to improve. They kind of focus on the, why is this report inaccurate, or, why is, this portion not right, instead of, hey, what can I do to help improve and, be a really good partner, for the dealership, from the fixed side. Turnover creates a lot of stress and a lot of, bad decisions. And it's not any fault of anybody else. They're just, either new to the position, or, that amount of turnover creates a lot of additional pressure, whether it's not having enough advisors, technicians, in any of those key positions.
Yeah. And I think going back, just to your whole point of reactive versus proactive, right? We're trying to be proactive in our management style, proactive as an advisor every single day. And what we often see or run into is we're always in that reactive mode. We're always putting out fires. We're hardly ever looking for the arsonist, but dang, we're good at putting out those fires, right? And I think the reality is it always usually comes back to, anytime I know that we're dealing with the dealership, is if you kind of back up just a little bit and you say, okay, well, what was the goal for today? What was the goal for the month? Have we broke it down? We use SMART goals a lot, right? We want them to be specific. We want them to be measurable, attainable, and then relevant, and then time bound, obviously. So the big thing there is it's just backing it up to where I know what I'm supposed to do every single day. I have a target for the month, and I know the daily action, right? I've identified, I have some sort of daily action that I know if I achieve X, then I'm going to be successful. And then what's my daily accountability? And look at, we were just training this morning, and with a store, it's, we're already a week into the month. And one of the first questions is, hey, what's your goal for the month? They don't have one, right? I don't know. Okay, well, what should it be? Let's think about it. And then really diving into those using data to make a data-driven decision versus, oh, I think I want to do this, or I know I want to increase, right? Right now, forecasting, we come up on the end of the year, forecasting is always a big conversation. And Tom can allude to this, better than I can. And when we talk about the forecasting scenario, the common joke is, well, we'll just do 10% better, or just better than last year, or we're just going to grow, right? Or I don't know, what do you think we should do? What's the process, when we're doing that? And I think all that ties back to your comment, Brandon, about being reactive versus proactive in that scenario.
Tell me if I'm wrong. These are way old numbers from memory, and this could be totally off base. But I remember, and it was when I was in the aftermarket crash parts game. You're going to do 20% more every year anyway because of cost of living increases. That sounds high, but I always heard that when we were trying to forecast, we had to go above and beyond just what was already going to happen just because of life. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is if your costs go up, right, from either a part cost or labor cost, you're going to strategically pass that along, so to speak, to the customer. You're going to raise prices, right? So you could naturally, if you're just looking at sales, which I think you're alluding to, Brandon, year over year, just by raising pricing, you're gonna drive a year over year performance improvement. What we really try to focus on is the metrics of production, right? How many more hours are we going to produce this year versus last year? And then, of course, we get into the value of those hours, whether it's effective labor rate or margin. But yeah, I mean, the big thing in forecasting too is recognizing those events for the future, and also thinking about, hey, what happened this year that we don't necessarily predict is going to happen next year? Whether what was there a big opportunity that happened just because something happened within my particular brand? Maybe had a huge recall that you don't necessarily are going to have in 2025. Or conversely, hey, maybe there's a dramatic weather event in a month that traditionally that doesn't happen. Well, when you're looking from year over year, month over month, well, hey, we're probably not going to forecast that big event's going to happen again. But a lot of that detail and really the biggest missing piece, I think, in forecasting is the people side. Hey, we're going to do 20% more. The numbers are easy, right? Just put some math together and, you can make it make sense. However, how many technicians and how many advisors, and parts people do we need to actually produce this forecast? And, that's what we really try to focus on the stores is that people aspect. Obviously technician, advisor, and a parts person are all going to produce X on average, based off either brand benchmarks or current store performance. Well, how many of those do you actually need in order to perform the forecast? A lot of times we find, hey, you don't have enough people, or the people you do have, there's some productivity opportunity within those particular positions. And then that's what we work on to make the forecast mean something.
Is it different in a political year too, the forecasting? Just real or imagine the economic climate just in general, I would think. Maybe. I don't know. With EVs?
Yeah, I think it plays I think we see it everywhere, right? I don't think it's unique in automotive by any means, but I think it plays a fact just in the human emotion side of that.
Yeah.
But are we going to change our forecast because of it? That goes back to the data-driven decisions, right?
Yeah.
Look at the data. I think that kind of gets pushed aside if we just focus on the data piece and what are we trying to achieve, and then what do we need to get there. To Tom's point, the staffing is constantly something that's missed, right? Is, hey, I'm just going to do this. And then I look at my seasonality because obviously every month's going to be slightly different. I just can't divide it by 12, right? And then, oh, by the way, I need 5 more technicians. Well, January is not going to look the same as June, right?
Yeah.
Regardless if it's the same working days or not, it's going to be different based on the staffing piece. And that's usually, it is one of the biggest areas that is missed when we're talking about forecasting.
Are you guys seeing you mentioned turnover? Is it one more than the other as far as techs versus advisors? Are you seeing that tip one way or the other, or is it just a mix?
Add managers into that, right? Techs, advisors, managers. You said it earlier on LinkedIn. I don't think a day can go. I don't know when the last time I've looked at LinkedIn and I haven't seen at least 5 new congratulations on a new position, or I've started a new position, or I'm looking for a new position. And, a lot of it is management that we're seeing.
True.
A lot of these managers, there's a lot of service manager roles out there that are open right now where people are looking to get involved with a company. And it comes down to, we talked about that turnover just a little bit, but the reality is especially now, people want to work somewhere for a company that, one, has purpose. They feel like they have purpose, right? And they invest in their people to develop that individual. Because if that dealership or that dealership group isn't doing that, those two things at least, there's somebody else that is, right? And I think that's part of that management turnover side, to where nobody likes to lose. Nobody wants to go work for a dealership that's in the bottom 10% and they're not actively trying or actively investing in increasing performance, increasing skill development within their entire team, right? There's a lot of KPIs. They're probably getting hit over the head with KPIs, right? That's pretty common. But the reality is I want to work somewhere that invests in me. I don't like to lose. Nobody likes to lose at the end of the day. That's why they have turnover, right?
Yeah.
They're tired of losing, whether if it's a technician, an advisor, a BDC person, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. They're tired of losing. If they were winning at their role at that dealership, do you think they'd leave?
All right.
Nope.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think when you're thinking about development, even the bench, right? Because when you see these different opportunities, we'll call it LinkedIn, and hey, I've started here, or I think even more, we're seeing more dealer principals and owners reaching out to say, hey, I have this amazing position, even on the part side, which has really been an anomaly. The lowest turnover in any dealership historically is in the parts department.
Right.
And you're seeing more and more ads for parts management, which I think a lot of it, again, it's that there isn't a real good development pipeline, within some of these dealerships, and it's, really a shame because, and sometimes you see that, these are large groups that are pushing, hey, we need a spectacular person for this amazing position, in this location. What happened to the pipeline? Right? What happened to the bench? And I think a lot of times when you're not continually looking at opportunity to develop, you don't have that bench, right? You don't have that next player to come in. Ideally, any of those transitions, it's because of retirement or promotion, or taking a bigger lateral move, so to speak, within a company. But unfortunately, a lot of the situations, they don't have that bench. But even more dangerous is they promote to failure because they don't have that immediate good process of developing the next manager. And we see a lot of that where you were just the best at this particular position, so now we're going to put you in charge of everybody else. And that has a whole host of other complications, especially when you don't have real good development processes.
Yeah. Well, recognizing, and Tom says this all the time, recognizing that it's okay to be the number one advisor, the best of the best at your job. That's okay. But we often view advancement in this automotive field as a promotion. Well, if I'm the best service advisor, I'm making great money, I've got great clients, good processes, good environment, maybe I don't want to be a manager, right? Maybe I'm really happy with what I'm doing right now. But unfortunately, in general sense, we look at it like you have to be promoted, right? That's what we celebrate. We celebrate the promotions, We're not celebrating the amazing achievement that these guys and gals are doing every single day in their current roles.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think about management, but you're right. I mean, I had somebody bail on this podcast the week of we were supposed to shoot it because they had moved jobs, man, and he couldn't talk about that stuff anymore, Yeah. So yeah. You mentioned optimizing traffic versus just wanting to get more traffic, and that ties into to me the proactive versus reactive, because if you get in a rut, man, if that's what you're always doing is putting out fires, And obviously you need business. So traffic is looked at as a good thing, but I think it's an endless cycle, right? One feeds the other. You're going to be reactive if you don't have good processes and it's all just about the traffic, right? Instead of optimizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you hit it right on the head with that. It's really easy to just look at the numbers and say, okay, we need more traffic. If I drive more traffic, then clearly my numbers are going to go up. And at the end of the day, are we really taking care of the customers that are currently coming in? Are we optimizing the repair orders that we already have? Why would I want to add more customers to that chaos if that's what's happening? If I'm not performing at the level I want to perform. Like we had a store recently where we're talking to an advisor, right? Doing a training with an advisor. And one of the problems they were facing is they couldn't get the customers to come back to the desk to finish the sale. Like the customer kept walking off. And so I'm like, well, that doesn't make, like, why would the customer just walk off after the service drive? I greeted them, like, that's kind of weird, right? And so, we made them just repeat back, hey, what's your exact process? Oh, okay, well, I say hello. Here's my kind of script that I go through. And then I have them sign this. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why did I sign anything? Like when I sign something, that means I'm done, right? Well, yeah. Okay. And so just by talking through that process and just slowing down and saying, okay, what's actually happening here? Because could you imagine if we took that dealership and dumped 50% more traffic onto it? What did we gain? We gained some chaos and guaranteed bad CSI, CXI, MPA, whatever you want to call it, right? Bad customer service is guaranteed to happen. And we really impacted the business in a negative way. And so looking at optimizing what the current repair order structure looks like, what's coming in, are we really kind of looking in the mirror and saying, all right, am I really doing everything I should be doing? Do I have a solid write-up process? Do my people know what they're supposed to sell and when they're supposed to sell it? Are they set up for success? Do I have an inspection process that gets a quality inspection to the customer? Easy communication line. Do I have a good active delivery process? There's so much that goes into it to where we feel often we kind of get in that rut, like you said, or we get in this position to where this is just the way it is. And then we just think we need to add more traffic. Well, that doesn't make a logical sense, does it?
Yeah.
You're really not in that situation valuing the customer's time. The customers now, I mean, obviously, price, especially, recent, economic situations, but the real reality is that, the time, valuing their time is really at a higher level than really what the price of something is. And when you just turn the volume up without consideration of the customers, how are we valuing their time currently? Hey, you may get a little initial boost, but you're going to pay for it later, right? You're going to, and unfortunately, ideally, I mean, how many times a year, ideally, does a customer come to a dealership in the service? 2.5. Well, if you've created a huge issue with that client, especially a brand new client, hey, you put a bunch of marketing out there. Hey, we haven't seen you in 2 years. Come on in. You're not going to notice the impact for 6-10 months. I mean, you're not going to notice that problem because, again, the next time they're supposed to come in, is about another or 6 or 10 months. So I think there's a lot of, they're just not aware of that impact of just turning up the volume. I mean, ideally you want both, right? You want to have great processes. So when you do turn that volume up and you bring new customers in, everybody's happy and we're retaining those new customers.
I think it's focusing on that customer lifetime value, right? They're thinking about that. And oftentimes, like, look at your receptionist or your BDC when I call a dealership. When's the last time we could do it right now. We could pick up the phone and call any dealership, right? And what's that phone experience going to be like when we're trying to get to a service advisor or even when we're trying to book an appointment? Well, if I'm a new customer, right, or if I'm your greatest customer ever, if I have a negative experience, thinking about how much I lost as a business owner, right, or general manager, and I'm looking at net profit at the end of the day. Well, what did that transaction cost me? Because I didn't train my employee on how to handle that phone conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a trap I think that's easy to fall into in any business. This is going to be a little different, but it's going to be a lot different. But I think it's the same concept. I had an online record store in like the early 2000s on eBay. I was a power seller. I was selling music out of the spare bedroom of my house.
45s or 33s.
I'm not that old, but it was still a. Yes, I was selling vinyl records because it's a niche thing, right? But I mean, it was CDs, which is still makes me sound old. But it was a low margin. It was, especially on eBay, it was a race to the bottom. So I was undercutting everybody, and man, I was killing it. And I would get in an order, and I would have to bubble mail 200 CDs in a day and go to the post office and do it. I would have much rather, and I probably would have given better service. Could I have charged a little more and cut that down to about 100? You know, it's the same concept with any business. There's that sweet spot there somewhere that I think we're always trying to find, you know, because more traffic equals success. Well, not if you can't handle it. And,
Right.
and again, if you're in that cycle of that's what success probably looks like to a lot of, dealerships is heavy traffic, and we're running around frantic doing the thing, you know, but it's, like you said, costing you on the back end and scores and everything else, and returning customers. I mean, retention, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times they just don't quantify it, right? Because they're used to the chaos, right? They grew up in the chaos probably, and so they're used to that. That's their, comfort zone, we'll call it, or the norm. And so they're running around. Yeah, it looks like success to them because everybody's busy, right? Everybody's running around. Well, they're also stressed to their limit, and we have 50% turnover. You know, congratulations, right? So I think it's a big focus to your point.
You guys had some stories, some real world stories. Did you want to share those? One was about some bonuses that was that was interesting.
Oh, yeah, it goes back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier when it comes to really just setting your team up for success, right? I think, and to all their credit, right? You get excited managers, that want to do the right thing. They have the intention of doing the right thing. They're trying to drive sales. They're trying to get the team excited. They gather them up or whatever they do. They have a contest. They have a spiff, whatever you want to call it. Everybody has something, right? Well, in this particular scenario, the store does all that. They have great intentions, gather everybody up. Everybody's going to have a bonus, right, on certain things. Well, they decide to bonus on different items they were going to sell. Okay. And so they all have different maintenance items that they were going to sell. So it's towards the end of the month is when, we kind of learned about this, of course. And so I asked one of them, well, what was your bonus? Because it just kind of came up in conversation. And one of their bonuses was on a product that they didn't sell. They didn't sell the product. It was on a service and a product that they probably meant to sell, used to be somewhere, I'm sure, on the shelf, but haven't sold any for months. There's no focus on it. And oh, by the way, they don't know what it is. They're like, I don't even know what this is. Well, it's the end of the month. Like, how did this happen, right? And so it's comical. It's wildly frustrating, but it's comical. It's like, well, how do we even get to this point, right? And you look back and it's okay. The intention was great. I understand the intention. The intention was right on point. Might have missed a little in the execution piece, right? And then training on how to do that. And then if they had questions, well, what would we do differently? And then once you explain it, it's like, oh, okay, well, now I kind of understand what that service is. I know that we can actually complete that service. It's just one of those situations where somebody got a little too excited and had the intention of doing something great and then sped through the process. Right. We didn't take, Tom talks a lot about like the pause, like taking a pause, right? And we do it with our decision making as leaders. It's the same thing when we come up with these situations. It's taking that pause, making sure that we've set them up for success. Just like everything else we do, or onboarding, any new process in the shop, anything we do. Did we take a minute? Do we have everything we need? Does everybody have the tools and the resources to be successful at the end of the day when we implement this?
Did I understand right that a store was using you guys as a carrot, basically, for new hires, as far as a training, a way to really farm out training, if you think about it, instead of, that's pretty, maybe I misunderstood that, but if that's true, that's cool.
Yeah, really, for us, we're really appreciative, especially that location, but all locations that really see that immense amount of value in the development piece, that they are promoting the fact that if you come on board as a manager, you are not without support. Hey, we have this training program, we have this support, from us, to guide you along the way, especially if you're a manager that, hey, you have a relative amount of experience, but maybe you're just not very comfortable with that particular brand. So you always have that uneasiness. Or, hey, I was a manager at a location, but I had this immense amount of other management support, and now I'm going to be by myself. Well, that's kind of a scary deal, right? Like, who can I lean on? We're obviously very, appreciative that they thought that highly of our support to the dealership, that, hey, not only do you have all these great benefits, it's a great brand, here's a great area, great ownership, and we're going to have this development opportunity for you, with Vesperio.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with doing that, I think it goes kind of back to what we talked about earlier with that turnover scenario as well. It ties into just that whole overall thought, because we're always, as dealers, right, general managers, fixed ops directors, it seems like they're looking for managers. To Tom's point, there's a service manager posting, there's a parts manager posting. It seems like every day, not hard to find, right? And so to me, when they offer that, it just kind of sparks a light bulb of like, well, hey, isn't this an amazing thought? If I'm a dealership and I'm looking for a manager, maybe there's a great service advisor somewhere, maybe there's a great shop foreman somewhere that's looking for that next step, but they're kind of cautious about it, right? I know going into that first management role, that is a heavy step. Regardless of what your past was, if you were the number one service advisor and you've been watching them for 15 years and you think you understand, right? Well, when you're the last guy in line or last gal in line to make the decision, that is quite a bit different than being that previous position. So to me, when they start offering things like that, you have that transparency of, hey, we understand this is a big step coming into this role, and here's all the amazing benefits and things that we're going to offer. And oh, by the way, one of them is a complete support and training and professional development program that can guide you with any questions that you might have, right? Because a lot of dealers and dealer groups, large, mid-sized dealer groups, they don't really have that structured opportunity to provide that one-on-one training, the resources, the tools. Because if I'm a new manager, hopefully that means that I'm a little bit of a self-starter. I'm kind of the go-getter. Well, usually those people are eager to learn, eager to do more. Well, if I had something that I could go into, like our online academy, and look at all these different resources, all these different trainings, download different guides, things that I could use and actually implement in my business, and I feel empowered as a leader to do that coming in as a new manager. And, oh, by the way, if I get stuck or bump my head, I can pick up the phone or shoot an email or shoot a text to one of the guys or gals at Visperio. That's a pretty good feeling.
Yeah.
So to me, it really widens the net. Like if I'm a GM or I own a bunch of dealerships, I'm looking at that like, hey, let's offer this everywhere, because now I'm casting a wider net and I'm going to start attracting some other talent that may have never applied.
Yeah. Yeah, that's smart, man. That's so cost effective because any job I've ever had was all my training was always trial by fire. It was throw you in the deep end and let you, no matter what the position was.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about all the chaos that's going on and all the traffic, I was always looked at as oh God, it's the new kid. Oh, it's the new guy. Okay, I got to train him up. I mean, man, that's brilliant. Outsource it, right? I mean, essentially, that's what they'd be doing, right?
Well, yeah, just having that support system. I mean, there's a lot of instances that we run into working with some of these newer managers that they really are on the right track, like the things that they're thinking about, but because they don't have that depth of having that experience in the past, they're hesitant. Right? If you've done something a number of times and have seen how it succeeds, and most importantly, see how it doesn't work, right? To be able to learn from that and then be able to pivot, there's a level of confidence when you make those decisions, right? Because you've seen it happen before. Well, in these instances, there's a lot of, it's brand new information. So even just to be able to have a support system where, hey, you're on the right track. Hey, let's do the math on that. Yep, you're right on that. And really get that confidence so they can make that really good decision and be, most importantly, confident with their team, right? Because that's a lot of it, right? If the team does not believe that you're 100%, sure of what we're about to do, it's a little tricky. So just, even just having that support system, because a lot of times they're on the right track. They just need that, affirmation, confirmation. Hey, you know what? That's exactly right. That's how you should do that.
Yeah.
And I think that ties into one of the big things when we are creating Vesperio is we wanted to make sure, one, it was obviously unique and something totally different, and we don't come into the store. So we provide all the tools, all the resources, all the guidance that you would ever need and want to empower yourself as a manager, a new manager, even as an advisor, right? Parts manager. We empower you to be the hero in the situation, to really develop and guide your team. Because the moment that we step into the store, instantly devalues that manager. We've seen it happen for decades, right? Every employee is looking around, what's going on, right? It instantly devalues the current management staff. That's just what happens. And so by providing it in this manner, we allow that employee, that new manager, even an existing manager that's just looking for that next level of performance, to have a tool and a resource to go to guide them to get to that next level and really develop and manage their team.
Do you guys want to talk about the Stellantis store?
Yeah, I think that's a good story. Perfect example. You had an internal promotion through a store. The managers really has a lot of the right ideas, but perfect example of that, maybe not having the confidence to make this particular decision or how to frame out on really solving the correct problem, from a root cause instead of solving symptoms, which we're fantastic at a lot of times as service and parts managers. So that location, the focus is always, when we're looking at we'll call it the service department, is really about production, right? What is our current production? What are we capable of doing? And how can we get everybody on the same page to drive as many hours or throughput through the shop the right way? Once we have those tools in place, then and sometimes at the same time, right, depending if there's something super obvious from an expense side, that's really just total leakage, right? It's not a personnel decision. It's not a, need to have, it's just a situation that they're just not paying attention to, and it's creating leakage, from a profitability. So in that particular location, we drove a tremendous amount of hours improvement through the dealership, roughly 500-600 more hours a month. And then that ultimately translated along with, again, some expense right sizing the right way, not cutting a bunch of people, not doing what I would call easy way to get profitability, which is changing a bunch of pay plans and, firing a bunch of people. Hey, we kept everybody together. We didn't do any of that stuff. Just fix the expense issues that were controllable, right? That were just creating some leakage. And that's where before we got involved was averaging $30,000 in a negative on profitability. Currently averages $35,000, $36,000 a month, and has had 2 months over $50,000 of profitability, including this particular month coming up, finalizing in November. So, really a good story to celebrate, not because, hey, what we did, but collaboratively as a team and what the manager is really driving. The thing that's most exciting from us is where they start really understanding how things work and they're doing things on their own. They're taking a concept that they learned in this area of the department and they're applying it because the concept works, multiple areas, and they're making good decisions. Which is great because ultimately, we want that self-sustainability, right? We want them to be able to, catapult, on their own, so that, and that's not unique, but that was a specific recent, one that we had talked about in the past. So,
yeah. And that store specifically is on our program of advisor and leadership. So what's nice about that is when you're on both, you're all coming up with the same kind of thoughts. You're coming up with the same skill development, and you're building on top of one another. We have the management team that's on board, obviously, and they're developing and implementing different things in the shop, to Tom's point. And then we also have the advisors that are going through the training academy, and they're thinking about, okay, well, now I need to improve this. Maybe it's my write-up process. Maybe it's how I do a one-price pitch. How do I do an assumptive close with a customer? My active delivery, like all of those things come together within the Performance Academy as they're doing their training. And then we tie the manager, of course, to the advisors throughout the training process. So it ensures that there's one, engagement, right? One of the biggest questions that you always see, and I get it, is, well, how do I get my advisors to actually do the training, right? That's one of the big things that always comes up is like, are they going to do it? Well, I understand why you would ask something like that based on all the other training that we've usually seen, which we like to call like check the box training. It's just, hey, yep, we offer training, check the box. It's usually, not so great training, right? And by tying the training together with the manager, we create that engagement between the two. We ensure that we kind of pause the training moment after you've learned a concept, you've learned how to implement something, how to execute on it. Well, now we pause that and then we prove it. Hey, you got to go prove it. So we have this entire process within the academy to where the manager and the employee sit down, and it could be an FOD and a manager. It could be a manager and an advisor, right? They sit down and they go over what was learned, and then they implement it together, and then they monitor it for a week, and then they have a 1 week recap after that. We want to make sure that you actually understand the core concept of what you just learned. And what's really interesting is when you look at, if you're inside the system, and of course we can see it, we look at the comments and feedback because it's all tracked and managed through the Performance Academy online. And we look at what the advisor is typing as their feedback, because every time they go through what we call a learning path, which is multiple courses that all relate to one subject, is they're asked a series of 5 simple questions about what they learned, how they're going to implement it, a few different things. Well, when you start reading their feedback, these aren't like 1 to 2 words. I mean, these are paragraphs of things that they've learned, they want to implement, they have more questions on, they need guidance and support from their manager. They're literally saying, one of them even said, hey, I need somebody to call me on my BS. Like they recognized just by taking the training that, oh, I do this, I need somebody to call me on that. I need an accountability partner, right? And when we see stuff like that, it is just amazing to us. Like it just like fills our bucket completely, right? Because we've spent 2 years building this thing, right? And we know that it's working the way it's intended, right? They're getting the value out of it and they're executing on it. And to Tom's point, like that store, I mean, could you imagine having it'd be hundreds of thousands of dollars in net improvement at this point? Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big deal for a store that's never made net profit to start making big net profits.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if somebody's interested in Vesperio Performance, what do they need to do, guys?
Call Tom.
I have 3 phones. They all have the same phone number, but somehow I got 3 of them. I don't understand how this works, but
I think that there's multiple ways you can get a hold of us. You can send us we're heavy on LinkedIn. You can send us a message on LinkedIn. Obviously, our website's the best place to check us out. So I'm sure we'll drop a link into the website here. It's just www.visperio.com. Or you can always call us as well. We have contact methods on the website. But check out the website. We take you through a deep dive of inside the academy. There's a short 60-second video in there where you can get a really good understanding of what the academy has to offer. And it's really an opportunity to have an all-in-one system that you can not only use for your professional development and training, you can have all of your SOPs housed inside the system. So within the academy, you have a customized learning library. And within that learning library, you can put everything from best practices. Let's say it's phone call recordings where somebody did an amazing job taking care of a customer on a phone or booking an appointment. All those can live inside the system. All of your onboarding processes can live inside the system. Everything lives in one system to where if I'm an advisor and I'm curious about something, I can go in. There's more likely some sort of download, best practice that's dealer related. I can implement it today. I am empowered to actually change my performance every single day by using this tool.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think just reiterate one of the largest advantages to the platform from a manager is that in a situation the platform is going to take about 90% of the lifting of the development, let's say for the advisors. But what I think makes it special is that last 10% that the system guides the manager on what the advisor had learned, kind of what were the key moments. You obviously get the feedback from the advisor, which, how many times, in our business that you have an employee giving you permission to help them, right? That's the most exciting thing. They're going in there and they're saying, hey, I learned X. I'd really like to do Y, and I need your help. Like, what a golden opportunity it drives that narrative of, hey, how do I sit down and increase performance? Well, hey, the system's guiding you there. All you have to do is spend a couple of minutes with that individual, sit down and kind of agree how you're going to do it. And again, hold accountable, but also what support is needed from the manager. And the manager, again, is empowered to do all of that. They're not looking necessarily for somebody else to drive that initiative. And they have an enormous amount of, return respect for that situation. We have the sort of fact, yesterday we were having a conversation and he's like, hey, the success that we are having, I am directly relating to how this program develops my team and most importantly, myself. Like and in that situation, they are existing on the platform by themselves. They're using the platform. They're using the assessments in the system. They're having one-on-ones. They're all excited about the training. He had his meeting today. In fact, they do a daily huddle, which is a part of our, training program to help develop those processes. But hey, this is not, again, reiterating to some of maybe the advisors that aren't as engaged into the training. Hey, this is not a check-a-box program. You're actually going to get something out of it that you're going to be able to use today to improve yourself and ultimately, your career in the business. So that's, hearing that feedback is, amazing.
So I'm a manager, right? And I've done training before, and I've got your training. How is yours going to be any different?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the main difference is, one, the engagement process within the platform, right? There's a lot of interactiveness in the training. We often relate our training to, diet and exercise. Like our program is diet and exercise. Anything that you have success in, right? There has to be some amount of work, right, for it to be sustainable. So there's a little bit of work that needs to get done. Not a lot, but a little bit of work. So the real difference that we have in the program is not only do we talk about the principle of an idea, which a lot of trainings do a great job of, hey, this is why, right? This is what this means. But we also get into the details, which a lot of them don't necessarily get to that piece of it, right? Where, hey, not only this is why and how, we're going to show you how to actually do it. And we're going to give you the resources to execute on it. Every training advisor and manager, but specifically on the manager side, has multiple resources inside of the training itself, whether it's a template, whether it's a structured process that you can, manipulate on your own, or whether it's just an example of, hey, here's how you would want this to be laid out. We provide that. So when you get done the training, boom, you have a resource. You don't have to wait to have other time to figure out, well, I love that idea. I really understand why I should be doing it, but I really don't have a great amount of time to go create this. Well, hey, it's there for you. And more importantly, if you want that customized, depending on dealership needs, then we can customize it. And it only belongs to that particular dealership or group of stores, depending on the scenario there. But we remove that roadblock in our training, which I think is the biggest difference maker in the platform.
Yeah. And we have, so that I'm thinking as Tom's talking about that, one of the groups has one store, and working with the general manager, and the general manager is just, we'll say has a limited belief about opportunity, because they know they're building a new store in 17 months, right? And I only have X amount of base, so I really can't do any more. Like, this is just it. There really isn't any opportunity because we're busy every day, and I'm just going to have to wait till I get a new store. Well, to Tom's point, one of those assets and trainings is all about capacity and utilization. That's one of our trainings that are in the system, is capacity versus utilization. Well, really breaking down and understanding, that's what really helped this general manager to open their eyes, is just going through the worksheet, right? Going through the asset of, okay, let's look at capacity. Because, hey, you might be 100% right, Mr. General Manager. There might not be any opportunity. Boy, I'd hate to be in that environment, but there might not be any opportunity, right? Let's look at it. Let's just go through the math, because the data doesn't lie. And so we break down and start looking at, okay, here's our capacity. This is the true capacity with what we have. And then here's our current performance and the utilization that we already have. And then we quantify the difference between the two, and all of a sudden, now we have this giant void, or this gap of performance. I'm not saying we have to get to 100%, but hey, what if we're at 50% utilization, which isn't uncommon, and then we can get it to 80% or 75%? Well, that's a very, very large gap and a huge net increase when, before the conversation, it was, I can't really improve anymore. We're just going to have to wait 17 months till we get a new store, till we have more bays. So I think I can bring in more traffic. Well, it goes back to optimizing what we already have. Are we really optimizing the bays that we have? Not just the customers, as well as the bays, the utilization processes. Are my technicians proficient? And to Tom's point, having those guides and those resources and those assets that you can actually download, because they take the training, they look at the training, but now I have something that I can physically print out. If you want to print it, you can do it electronically, whatever you want it to do, but I can put pen to paper and look at my store and say, okay, this is the reality. Here's the data. And in that particular case, obviously it was eye-opening to that general manager and really helped the store in the long run, but it's a huge value add for these dealerships.
This episode was made possible thanks to a proud partnership with Visperio, which provides tailored solutions to ignite automotive dealership fixed operations, performance, and profit.